Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
Should you buy the synthetic Nike Tiempo Legend 10 Elite or the leather Adidas Copa Pure 2 Plus? Let's find out. Starting with the price, despite the huge change in design and materials, the price tag remains exactly the same at $230, which is by no means inexpensive, but it is technically the cheapest of the top-end offerings from Nike, while the Copa Pure 2 Plus is priced quite a bit higher at $280. Although, in fairness to Adidas, they do have a $230 option in the Copa Pure 2.1. However, it's quite a bit different from the 2 Plus and kind of its own thing. Perhaps something to be featured in a future comparison video, but for this one, we're going to be focusing on the 2 Plus. Regardless of which one you might be interested in, you can pick these up below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the links down below. When it comes to the uppers of these two football boots, there's no tiptoeing around it. The Tiempo is synthetic and the Copa is leather. Specifically, Fly Touch Plus synthetic that Nike claims is actually softer than the kangaroo leather they were previously using on the Tiempo, while the Copa features an upgraded variation of their Fusion Skin technology, which combines soft calfskin material in the forefoot and toe box area, seamlessly transitioning into a prime knit material through the midfoot and heel. And as you can very clearly see, there's no detailed explanation required to tell you which one of these two uppers is softer. While I can really appreciate what Nike have done with the synthetic upper of the Tiempo, as I've said in past videos, this really feels like more of a continuation of the Kangalite material from the CTR 360 Maestri series rather than a true Tiempo, because while this material is convincing in terms of being leather-like in a lot of ways, when you actually compare it to the real thing, it's really hard to say that this feels as good as this. At least if you're looking for the feel of leather, because I definitely think that there will be some people that would prefer the synthetic of the Tiempo, but when it comes to leather football boots, if you want the feel of leather, despite what Nike says with this new Tiempo upper, you're still much better off going for actual leather. What's unique as it relates to the touch of the synthetic Tiempo is that the surface does have more grip on the ball than a traditional leather football boot would provide. And while you do have some grip texturing in the form of these little dots on the medial side, just like the Legend 9 has, in general, the surface texturing of this material, whether it's because of the inclusion of their ACC technology or not, it just feels grippier on the ball than what you're going to find from the Copas and realistically any other natural leather football boot. From a touch perspective, it's definitely on the thinner side, although it does have some leather-like dampening qualities. However, from a softness and kind of pliability perspective, this material simply doesn't have that melting around your foot sensation that natural leather ultimately provides, which is not a bad thing if you prefer an upper that has a little bit more structure to it, because definitely when you're comparing the upper of the Tiempo to the upper of the Copa, if you want a more locked in responsive feel, you're definitely getting that more so from the Legends. What's also really nice about the Tiempos is it's one material all the way through, so from a touch consistency perspective, you really can't beat this. Where the upper of the Copas feels traditional, but also extremely modern. And while I know there's going to be plenty of people that will be upset with the fact that this isn't kangaroo leather, but calfskin instead, this material is as soft as just about any leather that you're going to find in the world of football boots right now. From a touch perspective, it is incredible on the ball, and from a comfort perspective, it just moves so nicely with your foot. And that's really where I would applaud this particular Fusion Skin upper in general, is that it just feels like a super soft second skin in terms of how it wraps your foot. No unnecessary stiffness, no real break-in time required. They feel like a pair of leather socks, and the lacing system that runs nice and deep through the middle really does a good job of allowing for plenty of adjustability, where while it's not as structured through the midfoot as what you'll find from the Tiempos, they still feel super secure on your feet. And again, from a comfort perspective, I just think it is top tier. I also mentioned the more grippy sensation that you get from the upper of the Legends. It's pretty much the exact opposite when it comes to the Copas. This has much more of a matte kind of slick finish, where if you don't want any additional grip, perhaps you're somebody that drags the ball quite a bit when it comes to dribbling, you're gonna love the matte kind of consistent leather feel that this boot has across the entire upper. When it comes to the base of these two football boots, whether you're talking about the sole plate or the stud pattern, I really feel like the Tiempo overall just has a better package. With the Copa Pure 2, just like the previous generation, recycling the torsion frame sole plate tooling from the Nemesis series that was introduced and then also discontinued quite a few years ago. And as an overall package, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but out of all the different sole plates and stud patterns that Adidas could have brought back if they were going to recycle something from the past, I just don't think this is the one that I would have picked. From a feel perspective, the sole plate is relatively firm, but also flexible. It's not really going to have any speed boot characteristics, despite the very sleek silhouette that is the Copa Pure 2 Plus. So in that regard, I actually think that it feels very natural and works well with the super flexible and soft feel that you have from the upper. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, you kind of have these half circle shapes with a bladed edge that do provide more aggressive traction than you perhaps might expect. The studs overall for an FG stud pattern are on the longer side, so if you play on particularly hard ground, I don't find it to be the most comfortable. Stud pressure from these two studs in particular can be a little bit of an issue, but on slightly softer or just well-kept pitches in general, none of that should be an issue. And from a traction perspective, it should be as good as anything, and as you would want from more of a traditional style football boot, you still get that freedom to twist and pivot while still getting a decent amount of bite when pushing off. Where the sole plate and stud pattern of the Tiempos, while technically all new for this 10th generation Legend model, it's pretty well a copy-paste of what they've been doing over the last several years, where you're going to find a sole plate that is relatively flexible all the way through, a little bit more so than what you're going to find from the Tiempos, which is my preference for this style of football boot. And then the stud pattern itself features your rounded studs in the forefoot, some toe pick bladed studs that Nike seems to be putting on almost every one of their models now, and then of course the bladed studs in the heel. So pretty much your traditional Tiempo setup that has been proven to work extremely well, and a lot of people are big fans of it, so why would Nike change it up? If you're asking me, when it comes to traction as well as feel of the sole plate, there's no competition. I like what Nike have done more. And then there's the weight, which maybe isn't the most important factor for the majority of people buying into this category of football boots, but that doesn't negate the fact that there is quite a big weight difference between these two. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Copa Pure 2 Plus. You can see that they weigh in at 7.9 ounces, the equivalent of 223 grams, still in the 7 ounce range, so relatively lightweight, but on the higher side of things. Then you have the Tiempo Legend 10 Elite, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.1 ounces, the equivalent of 202 grams. So you are talking about a weight difference that is relatively noticeable, where these are definitely light, but the Tiempos fall into a weight range that many top-end speed boots are in. So if you are looking for that overall lighter weight feel, the Tiempos provide that more so than the Copas. When Nike makes the claim that the synthetic of the new Tiempo is softer than the kangaroo leather that they've used in the past, I legitimately think that you could go and try these on and say to yourself, wow, they might be right. But then when you put the Copas on the other foot, you will immediately think differently, because there really is no comparison between these two. And that's not to say that the Tiempos are uncomfortable by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to the Copas, these are just so much softer. And keep in mind that comfort is such a subjective thing. Everybody likes the fit and feel of something different, and I think that's where these two football boots really separate themselves, in that the Tiempos feel much more modern. There's more structure to the upper despite them being soft and flexible, which ultimately does result in a boot that feels more so like it's squeezing your foot rather than wrapping it closely, which is more so the sensation you get from the Copas, where the upper, be it the leather at the front or the prime knit through the midfoot, has a little bit more elasticity to it. So despite these two boots realistically being pretty similar in terms of overall shape and width, the end result is that the Copa feels a little bit wider and a little bit more relaxed in terms of how it fits, while still fitting very closely, of course. To touch more specifically on the overall width, I think both of these boots will work well for most foot types. However, I definitely think that the Copa overall, particularly through the toe box area, is just wider and better suited for wider foot types. The synthetic material, while it does soften up and stretch slightly compared to the leather of the Copa, it's just a much more snug, more structured material that just isn't going to have the same level of expansion. So particularly through the toe box area, I do think the Tiempos are on the snug side, at least for my foot shape. So from a comfort perspective, based on shaping as well as feel of the upper, to me, hands down, the Copa is more comfortable. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US. The Tiempos, like most Nike models, do run true to size, where the Copas run maybe like an eighth of a size long, but not necessarily long enough to where I would recommend going down in size unless the boots you're currently wearing are already too big. So for the vast majority of people, whether you're going Nike or Adidas, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, as much as I would love to tell you that one is dramatically better than the other, the reality of this comparison is that these are both very good football boots, but ones that are entirely different in terms of the experience that they have on offer. Which is funny because they do technically fall into the same category. If you've been a fan of the Tiempo line because you like the feel of a leather upper, as much as I think a lot of longtime Tiempo fans would actually enjoy the synthetic of the Legend 10, if you just want that pure leather feel, you'd be much better off going for the Copa Pure 2 Plus. Where if you're not as much stuck on the idea of having a natural leather football boot, but you want something that does in fact have leather-like qualities, I think the Tiempo Legend 10 as a technical achievement is really impressive, and overall, they're great football boots. Truthfully, there's not a lot about either of these two boots that you can harshly criticize. They really are two of the best options currently on the market. However, if I was forced to choose between these two football boots, as much as I've been impressed by the synthetic upper of the Legend 10 Elite, you just can't beat the soft, natural feel of the real thing. The Copa Pure 2 Plus is, in my opinion, the best modern Copa boot to date.